first thing Marcus Cole registered every morning was the smell of himself in the heat. Not shame. He had moved past shame around day 4. This was something more physiological. The specific animal fact of a 39-year-old man in a July heatwave in Gary, Indiana, wearing the same cotton mechanics shirt for 11 consecutive days inside a dead metal box that had been absorbing direct sun since 6 a.m. The shirt had gone stiff at the collar. Old Kuchung Gris baked so deep into rusted iron panels that it no longer registered as a smell but as a presence, something between mineral and memory. The temperature inside the truck at 10 in the morning was 103 Fahrenheit, and climbing toward a projected daily high of 98 Fahrenheit. The 1983 Grumman step van had not moved its own power in at least 6 years. Its broken radiator fan ticked in sharp, arrhythmic bursts, 3 metallic knocks, then dead silence, then 3 more, like the pulse of something that had forgotten it was supposed to stop. The steering wheel was too hot to grip with bare hands. So was the prep counter. Marcus knew both of these things without testing them. He had blister across his right palm that had since become a callus. He sat on the drop cloth he used as a sleeping surface and wiped the sweat from his eyes with his forearm, and his knuckles were grey with rust from work against the rear service hatch, trying to force the rear service hatch. His bank account held $834. He had once been the head chef of a 40-seat restaurant in Chicago that held a Michelin bib gourmand and a 3-year wait list. He had built the menu from scratch, an 11-item tasting sequence that used thermal immersion of fermentation, and the particular discipline was not creativity at the highest level, was not creativity, but control. He had run a kitchen of 7 people. He had been, by any professional measure, exceptional. Then Hargrove Culinary Group had decided he was a problem. The mechanism was familiar and clean. 17 fabricated sanitation violations filed with the Illinois Department of Health over a 5-week period in the spring of 4 years ago. The violations were detailed, procedurally correct, intuitive, and entirely invented. By the time Marcus could document the fabrication, his certification had been suspended, his restaurant had lost its lease, and his debt, a collection account now held at $11,432.18, had been sold to an agency that sent letters to his last known address, which was no longer an address he had. He had found the truck by accident, a handwritten note tucked under the windshield wiper, left by someone he did not know for a man he had not seen in 6 years. His culinary school mentor, Raymond Edgars, who had died in a ward at Methodist Hospitals of Gary at 3:22 in the morning on July 9th, and who had, apparently, left Marcus something in his will. The note said, "You are owed. The rest is in the floor." He had gotten into the truck. He had stayed across the lot through the truck's broken service window screen. The regional office of Hargrove Culinary Group occupied the ground floor of a renovated brick building with new signage and a valet stand. A black Mercedes S-Class idled at the entrance. At 8:17 a.m., a man in a pressed linen jacket walked out of the climate-controlled lobby, handed the valet his ticket without looking at him, and got into the car. Marcus picked up the Hargrove Provisions key from the prep counter. The attorney's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Broadway in Merrillville, and Marcus took a city bus that let him off 6 blocks away and walked in direct sun. He arrived with sweat darkening his collar and stood for 30 seconds in the lobby's air conditioning, feeling the cold hit the wet fabric and hold. There were 3 people in the conference room. The attorney, a precise woman named Delilah Strand, who wore her glasses on a chain and spoke in the deliberate cadences of someone billing by the minute, and 2 men Marcus had never seen. The first man he identified by his watch before he learned his name, a Rolex Daytona, stainless and ceramic, worn with the easy indifference of someone for whom its price had never been a fact worth knowing. He was Brent Edgars, Raymond's nephew apparently, and the only surviving blood relative. He wore a cashmere sport coat in late July and sat with his ankle crossed over his knee, as though the chair were his property and the room incidental to it. The second man was Brent's attorney. Delilah Strand opened the folder and read, Raymond Edgars had died with a documented estate of $240,000. The Miller Beach House, 4 bedrooms, a restored garden to Brent. the investment accounts, totaling $1,817, to Brent. The savings bonds. Brent. Then she looked at Marcus Cole, the 93 Grumman stepper van, vehicle identification number GDJ331K8DJ512843, currently located at 4417 West 5th Avenue, Gary, Indiana. No additional financial bequest is attached to this item. Brent Edgar's attorney made a sound, not quite a laugh, a careful legal restraint on the laugh he wanted to make. Brent said without looking at Marcus. He left you at describing weather. Flat. Marcus said nothing. He was looking at the prep counter in his mind. Nimai. The drop cloth, the rust dust, the ticking fan. He was thinking about a sentence Raymond had said to him once, 6 years ago, when Marcus was still cooking. Some things only reveal themselves to people who are patient enough to deserve them. Delilah Strand held out a sealed envelope. Raymond also left this, personal, outside the legal record addressed to you. Marcus took it. The envelope was rigid, something inside with structural weight, and it smelled faintly of Raymond's workshop. Turpentine cedar, varnish aged to sweetness. He placed it in his breast pocket without opening it. Brent stood, adjusted his cuffs, and said to his attorney, quietly but not quietly enough, "Have someone price out the towing and scrappage on that truck this week." Then he glanced at Marcus, a single 2-second assessment of someone he had already finished thinking about, and walked out. Marcus sat in the empty conference room for another 4 minutes. The air conditioning hummed. Through the 14th floor window, Gary lay flat and heat-blurred below him, running all the way to the steel-gray line of the lake. He opened the envelope. Inside, a hand-drawn diagram on stiff drafting paper. The floor plan of a Grumman step van. A circle drawn in red ink in the rear left corner, and 4 words in Raymond's block-printed handwriting. Pull the drain plate. He was back at the truck by 4:30. He had not gone anywhere else. There was nowhere else to go. $8.34, $11,432.18 outstanding. A city that had decided 4 years ago that Marcus Cole was someone to step around. The bus fare back to Gary had cost $2.75, which he had, and which reduced his balance to $5.59, which he noted and filed and did not dwell on. The truck's interior at 4:30 p.m. was worse than the morning. 9 hours of direct sun on a steel roof. His shirt soaked through in under a minute. He worked in the rear of the van with his back bent under the low ceiling, the diagram in his left hand. Sweat dropping from his jaw onto the aluminum tread plate. The floor was original diamond plate aluminum, worn smooth at the center from decades of foot traffic. He found the rear left corner by counting 2 steps back from the rear door, 1 step left from the wheel well. The tread plate looked identical to everything around it. He pressed along the seams with his thumb, there a seam fractionally wider than its neighbors. He almost missed it. A millimeter difference, maybe 2, the kind of tolerance that a man in a hurry, or a man who did not believe in the thing he was looking for, would walk past entirely. He pressed, nothing. He pressed the adjacent seam, nothing. He was on his knees for 22 minutes, methodically working each quadrant, his back running sweat, the broken fan overhead ticking its irregular rhythm. He almost stopped at minute 18. He sat back on his heels and looked at the floor and thought about the note. You are owed, and about Raymond, who had been one of the few people in Marcus's professional life who had treated the phrase culinary precision, not as a technical description, but as a moral category. A man who believed the highest form of cooking was also the highest form of attention. Marcus didn't stop. He pressed both seams simultaneously, diagonally, and felt a mechanical give deep in the floor. A soft, definite click, like a lock releasing through several inches of steel. The drain plate lifted, 8 inches square, flush with the tread surface, invisible unless you already knew. The air that came up from the space below was cooler, measurably, noticeably cooler, 3 or 4 degrees, and it smelled of cedar and old paper, and something that was not rust but older than rust. Marcus leaned down and looked into the compartment. The space was an 18 by 24-inch steel box welded into the truck's subframe. Someone had cut through the factory floor, installed a custom enclosure, and cedar-lined it to control humidity. The workmanship was precise. This had been done by someone who knew what they were preserving and intended it to last. He reached in with both hands. A flat tobacco tin first, rectangular, the kind manufactured between 1945 and 1965. Its surface patinated green and brown, its lid sealed with electrical tape hardened to something brittle. Beneath it, a manila envelope stamped Hargrove Provisions Detroit, My Confidential, in a 3-color lithograph faded to rust and sage. He opened the tin, oilcloth inside, and beneath the oilcloth $4,300 in cash, banded 20s, serial numbers dating to 1963 and 1964, clean and dry as the day they were sealed, and a folded sheet of blue-lined paper, the ink brown with age. He read the letter standing, his back bent, sweat still dropping from his chin onto the tread plate. The letter was from Vincent Hargrove Sr., not Raymond's family. A different man entirely. Vincent Hargrove Sr. had been the founder of Hargrove Provisions, a food service supply company that grew from a single Detroit warehouse in 1952 into a regional distribution network, serving 11 states by 1971. By 1974, Hargrove Provisions had been acquired by a national food conglomerate for a documented sum of $83,400,000, making Vincent Hargrove Sr., at the time of the sale, a man worth in excess of $60 million after taxes and legal fees. He had also, in 1968, bought a 1983 Grumman step van, which was impossible chronologically, and which Marcus reread twice before he understood. The van had been purchased in 1983, in Vincent's name, 6 years before his death, and it was not a corporate asset. It was personal. A man worth $60 million had bought a used food truck, had it registered under a secondary holding name, and had driven it, according to a paragraph in the letter that Marcus read 3 times, around Gary, Indiana, on weekends, cooking for people who could not afford to eat well. For 11 years, nobody had known. Not the family, not the board, not the business press. Vincent Hargrove Sr. had spent 11 years cooking out of a rusted truck in a city defined by industrial decay, and he had apparently considered this the most important work of his life. The manila envelope contained his holographic will, 12 pages, notarized by a Lake County notary on February 3, 1989, witnessed bearing a county clerk's filing stamp. The will left the entirety of a secondary estate, a commercial property parcel on Grant Street in Gary, valued in 1989 at $190,000, and a separate investment portfolio, titled in the holding company's name, documented at $312,000. To the person who proves, through their own hunger and their own hands, that the food truck's floor was worth opening. Raymond Edgars had found the truck in 1994. He had read the will. He had not opened it, had not been the right person, or had not believed he was. He had protected it for 30 years, waiting, and then he had left it to a former head chef sleeping on a drop cloth inside it. Marcus sat on the floor of the truck with the documents in his lap, and the cedar-smelling cool air rising from the compartment below. He did not cry. He sat very still in the way that a man sits still when he understands that the world has been larger and more deliberate than he believed. Then he heard tires on gravel outside. The man who knocked on the rear door was compact, 50 or so, with the physical economy of someone who lived in administrative buildings. Not soft, but calibrated for a different kind of exertion. Badge on the breast pocket of a gray short-sleeve city shirt. Prute Deputy Inspector Gary Dept, of Buildings and Enforcement. He extended a document without preamble. Emergency seizure notice. Vehicle identified as an unregistered commercial food unit. Improper storage of decommissioned food service equipment in violation of Ordinance 7114B. We've had 2 complaints from the adjacent property. Truck gets impounded at 8 a.m. tomorrow, unless you show current registration and a valid commercial food handler's permit for the facility. Marcus took the document, carbon copy, standard city seizure template, badge number, ordinance citation, date, stamp. Pruitt's expression was the particular expression of someone who has delivered this news to many people, and watched each of them understand, one by one, that they could not fight it. Board competence. The face of a process. Marcus read the ordinance citation. Gary Municipal Ordinance 7114B, subsection 3. He read it twice. Then he folded the carbon copy and put it in his shirt pocket against the manila envelope from the floor compartment. "What's the revision date on 7114B? Marcus asked. Pruitt stopped. A half-second recalibration. Not alarm, not concern, just the micro-expression of a man who has heard a word he did not anticipate from a source he had already categorized. "That's the current code," Pruitt said. "Okay," Marcus said. Pruitt left. His white City Fleet sedan pulled out at 5:47 p.m. The gravel crackled. Silence. Marcus stood in the truck for 43 seconds. He had spent 4 years reading the legal mechanisms that had been used to dismantle his career. He had read municipal code the way a chef reads a new technique. Not for entertainment, but for internalization, because understanding the system that destroyed you was the first condition of surviving it. He had read the Gary City Council Proceedings Bulletin every month for 3 years in public libraries, on the theory that people with authority over his life made their errors in the public record, if you looked at the right level of granularity. In March, he had read Resolution 2020-3441. It had vacated Ordinance 7114B in its entirety, replacing it with revised commercial adjacency standards under Ordinance 9221, passed by a vote of 7-2, effective May 16, 2023. Pruitt's seizure notice cited a code that had not existed for 14 months, one breath. Then Marcus began to work. The Gary Public Library on Massachusetts Street closed at 6 p.m. He was through the door at 6:03, 11 minutes before he knew the terminal, he knew the archive. He submitted the print job at 5:56, 4 pages. The full text of Gary City Council Resolution 2023-441, complete with the vote record, the effective date, and the explicit language vacating Ordinance 7114B, and the librarian, a woman named Greta, who recognized him from 3 years of regular visits, handed him the printout at 5:59 without comment. He was back at the lot by 6:31. He called the city ombudsman's voicemail. He identified himself by name, cited Pruitt's badge number, the ordinance on the notice, and the resolution number. He spoke in the precise sequential cadence of someone who understands that a recorded voicemail is a legal document, and that legal documents reward precision above all else. He left the message at 6:47 p.m. He noted the time. Then he called Delilah Strand. In sequence, he told her what he had found. In sequence, without embellishment. The compartment, the tin, the cash, the letter, and Vincent Hargrove's signatures by identity. The holographic will, the properties survey, investment portfolio, the filing stamp. He told her about Pruitt's notice. He told her about Resolution 2023-441. He spoke for 6 minutes and 50 seconds. She did not interrupt once. After he finished, she was quiet for 3 full seconds. "I need to see the original documents," she said. "Can you be at my office at 8 tomorrow?" "The inspector is impounding the truck at 8, Marcus said. A pause. "I'll be at the lot at 7:30. Don't let anyone touch that vehicle." At 7:47 a.m., Delilah Strand stood in the gravel lot with a notary, 2 paralegals, and a structural engineer she had apparently reached before 6 a.m. Pruitt arrived at 8:03 with a tow truck and a driver, who stayed in the cab. Delilah handed Pruitt a single-page letter. He read it. The board administrative certainty, the expression that had been the load-bearing structure of his professional persona for 20 years, went through something. Marcus watched carefully. Confusion, rereading, and then the specific exposed stillness of a man who has understood, in front of witnesses, that he has made an error he cannot walk back. "The ordinance in your notice was vacated 14 months ago," Delilah said. "Under Resolution 2023-441, your seizure filing is void. Any attempt to impound this vehicle constitutes unlawful conversion of private property." Mr. Cole filed a detailed recorded complaint with the Ombudsman's office at 6:47 p.m. yesterday. "We will be supplementing that complaint with this letter and a formal referral to the City Council's Oversight Committee." Pruitt said, "I'll need to verify." You should have verified before filing. His voice, when he spoke, had the quality of a chef calling a kitchen to attention. Not loud, not aggressive, but absolutely precise. The kind of voice that fills a room by refusing to chase it. He looked directly at Pruitt and said. Pruitt blinked. He didn't understand the reference. It wasn't meant for him. It was meant for the air. For the record. For the sentence a man in a cashmere sport coat had delivered in a conference room on the 14th floor in Merrillville. Delivered with the flat certainty of someone who had never once considered that the person across from him was listening. So, preparing, and already 3 steps ahead, the tow truck left. Pruitt left, the gravel settled. Marcus walked back to the truck, opened the rear door, and stood for a moment in the cedar-scented cool of the compartment air, rising through the open drain plate. Then he stepped out into the flat July morning. Darren Pruitt resigned from the Gary Department of Buildings and Enforcement 17 days later, following an ombudsman investigation that identified 11 improper seizure filings over 31 months. 10 of them concentrated in parcels adjacent to properties held by Brent Edgar's commercial holdings. The civil suit filed by 4 affected property owners named Pruitt personally. His name appeared in the Gary Post-Tribune on a Thursday page, 7 paragraphs. Brent Edgar's challenged the holographic will in Wayne County Probate Court. The challenge failed on September 3rd. The notarial record was intact. The 1989 filing stamp was authenticated. The court ruled in Marcus Cole's favor on all counts. The commercial property on Grant Street appraised in the current market at $312,000. The investment portfolio held in the Hargrove Proven Provisions Secondary Trust, through 37 years of compounding, paid out at $622,400. The Hargrove Culinary Group, the company that had fabricated Stephanie Sandation violations against Marcus's kitchen 4 years prior, became the subject of a separate proceeding when Delilah Strand's paralegals, reviewing the estate documents, identified a contractual relationship between Hargrove Culinary's licensing compliance director and Brent Edgar's holding company dating to 2019. The Illinois Department of Health reopened its records. The director of licensing compliance resigned in October. The Hargrove Culinary Group's operating licenses in Indiana were suspended pending review. Marcus Cole opened Edgar's Kitchen on Grant Street the following June 14th. The name was not sentiment. It was a specific, public, permanent record, the kind a man makes when he wants a name to mean something in a place where it was previously erased. Therastraw seated 31, ran an 8-item, rotating tasting menu sourced from 3 farms within 40 miles and earned a regional review in its first month that called the food technically ferocious and quietly human. He hung one thing on the wall behind the pass, the drafting paper floor plan, framed under glass, hand-drawn, yellowed at the edges, a red circle in the rear left corner, 4 words in block print. Pull the drain plate. On opening morning, Marcus Cole stood outside in early summer light. 61 degrees, a clean wind off the lake, in a pressed white chef's coat. He was not thinking about the money or the verdict or the names that no longer mattered. He was thinking about a billionaire who spent 11 years cooking out of a rusted truck in a broken city, and who had built one last dish, not for a table, not for a review, but for whoever was hungry enough and overlooked enough and patient enough to find it. Vincent Hargrove Sr. had understood something that institutions never do. That the people most worth feeding are the ones who have already been told, by every system designed to tell them so, that they are not worth feeding at all. Marcus Cole proved that a system built on paperwork can be dismantled by the exact same paperwork, if you have the patience to read the fine print. If you were in his place, down to your last $8, would you have hidden inside that metal oven to fight? Or would you have sold the truck for scrap immediately? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below.